Welcome everyone. My name is Necie Edwards and I am the host of Fibromyalgia Talks. On today's show we're talking about cannabis is medicine, and I have a very special guest with me in the studio today, Joseph Friedman of PDI Medical Cannabis Dispensary, and Joseph is the Chief Operations Officer. So welcome, Joseph, to Fibromyalgia Talks. How are you today?
Thank you, Necie. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope to share a lot of good information for the people that are viewing.
Great. So, Joseph, I was doing a lot of research about cannabis in the state of Illinois. And I know you know all of this, but for my audience, for many people who are not familiar with this, I just wanted to share a couple of things. One, Joseph Friedman, he's with PDI Medical, as I stated. PDI is owned and managed by pharmacists and cannabis experts to help you choose the best treatment for your needs. I also did some research on the state of cannabis in the state of Illinois in terms of the regulations, and I wanted to share the following. As of January 3rd, 2018, the Illinois Department of Public Health has approved applications for approximately 29,900 qualifying patients, including 245 persons under the age of 18 years of age. Since it began accepting applications for the Medical Cannabis Registry Program on September 2nd, 2014, approximately 34,700 individuals have submitted a complete application to IDPH, Illinois Department of Public Health. And a complete application means the qualifying patient has submitted an application and feed to the department. I'm sharing all this with you to let you know that cannabis is big business, especially when it comes down to medicinal cannabis in the treatment of many chronic illnesses, many chronic conditions. My show is all about chronic pain, but cannabis is just not limited just to chronic pain. There's been many children, for example, that have been diagnosed with conditions where they're suffering from seizures, a variety host of conditions that cannabis as medicine has been able to help the children to heal. And Joseph Friedman, he's our guest today, and he's going to just give us a wealth of information in terms of what we need to know about cannabis, also demystifying, the myth of what it's like to be a cannabis patient. I know many people have never stepped foot into a medicinal cannabis dispensary. I used to be one of those until I visit Joseph's dispensary, and I learned a lot. And I wanted him to be on the air with me today to share that knowledge with you all, because cannabis is medicine. So Joseph, tell us about cannabis and the dispensary. One question that I do want to ask you is, I do know that in the state of Illinois, I do believe there are about a total of 54 medicinal cannabis dispensaries, 53 or 54 in the state of Illinois.
It just became 54.
Okay, 54. So since there's a total of 54, what makes your dispensary unique and different from other dispensaries? And I'm asking that question because there's so many. And for someone who's new to this, people sometimes ask me, well, what do I need to look for? How does one differentiate from the other?
Right, and when you say there's so many, well, in reality, there's a lot more Walgreens than there are medical cannabis dispensaries in the state of Illinois. 54 is actually a very small number when you consider 13 plus million residents in the state of Illinois and where those dispensaries are located. But what differentiates PDI Medical, and that stands for Professional Dispensaries of Illinois, from all of the other dispensaries in Illinois is that my vision when I started this business was to have a healthcare model. So I'm a pharmacist. I have other pharmacists on board. I have a nurse there on Mondays. I have relationships with 2 colleges of pharmacy in Illinois, Roosevelt University College of Pharmacy and Chicago State University College of Pharmacy, where I have 4th-year pharmacy students doing 6-week clinical rotations. This was groundbreaking. This had never been done throughout in the country. and certainly not in Illinois. So we have pharmacy students that bring fresh knowledge of pharmacology, much better than my knowledge. I've been out of school for a while. And they sit in on consultations, and they add a great deal to these consultations and really help the patient.
Yes, and I've met two of your pharmacy students. I know one, her name was Paloma, and then the other one that's from Appalachia, Mimi.
Yeah, Mimi from Appalachia College of Pharmacy in Virginia. Now, what was interesting about that is I've been contacted by out-of-state colleges of pharmacy as well, and I've had students from Virginia, students from San Antonio, Texas. So, the word is out there, and they want to do and see a medical cannabis dispensary where pharmacists are involved.
That's great, and it was nice to see these two young ladies involved with this because they're very knowledgeable. They're very interested in this line of work, medicinal cannabis, and how it can help and heal people. And I just feel that they're going to help empower and educate a whole nother generation.
And it's an additional job opportunity for pharmacists.
Yes, yes. So tell me, in terms of a medicinal pharmacy, what are some things that people need to know who are interested in trying it for the first time? How do they start?
Well, there's certainly, I think you mentioned this, Necie, that there's a stigma associated with marijuana.
Yes.
And you know what, wherever you hear the term marijuana, especially when it's delivered by legislators like Jeff Sessions,
yes,
it's in the negative.
Very much so.
It's a negative tense. Cannabis is the medicinal name for marijuana, and we use cannabis at my dispensary. We use cannabis in the name of the Illinois program, the Compassionate Use of Medical Cannabis Pilot Program. So going back to your question, a patient can expect a process when they first want to see if medical cannabis could be an option for their underlying condition. There's a Q&A, and we can certainly answer a lot of those questions. I answer those questions every day. People call, they want to know, what do I need to do? How do I need to go about getting into the program?
Yes.
And then I explain that. And what I explain is it's a two-part process. You need to have a physician that supports this. So there's 41 qualifying conditions, so you have to have one of those qualifying conditions. 41 might seem like a lot, but there's many conditions that are rare neurological conditions that doctors rarely see in their careers. There's only a handful that are really out there, such as cancer, fibromyalgia,
yes,
seizure disorders, muscular dystrophy, multiple sclerosis. So that makes up the lion's share of the 29,000 patients that you mentioned. And so a patient needs to have a physician that is supportive of the program, supportive of them being in the program, and many doctors are not.
What do you think that is? Is it political?
Well, a lot of doctors don't want to stick their neck out. A lot of physicians work for organizations that have already put the kibosh on this, say you cannot certify any medical cannabis patients. It's against federal law, and we just won't have that here. But there's doctors that step out of that, and they see the benefit of it, and they do certify patients. In fact, on our website, we've got about a dozen doctors that are cannabis friendly that patients can call, make an appointment, and go see.
Now, when it comes down to getting a script, so let's say that your local primary care doctor is not comfortable writing a script.
And it's not a script.
Okay.
It's a certification.
Certification. So,
right.
Since it's a certification, do they need special training in order to complete their certification?
That's a great question. No, you can be any doctor in Illinois. There's no special training. Now that actually is different from other states where doctors have to go through a course before they can certify a patient, but Illinois doesn't require that.
In those other states, how long of a course is it?
It's, for example, in Pennsylvania, it's a 4-hour course.
Okay.
That's just one example. There's other examples. But you can be an MD or a DO in the state of Illinois, and you can certify a patient.
Well, it's very disheartening, and in my personal opinion, is that some doctors may not be comfortable with completing the certification, but yet many are very comfortable with giving you a script for opioids.
Right.
And that just seems like a huge disconnect to me. I mean, because when I think I'm a chronic pain patient, and I have fibromyalgia, and when I was first diagnosed, the pain was just very excruciating, very, very debilitating. And the first line of treatment that all of the doctors recommended was opioids, which I refuse to use. Because number one, you hear all the stories about people becoming addicted to opioids. I was fearful of that because number one, I had never had a problem, being addicted to any medication or drugs or anything. I didn't want to go down that road. And the other thing too, Joseph, is that I just didn't feel that that was the best course of action for me. And I started a chronic pain support group. And many of the patients in the group, we share similar stories. And for many of them, they wish that the doctors would have recommended medicinal cannabis a long time ago, because many of them are in a situation now that, they have developed an addiction to opioids, which takes them down a whole nother road.
Right, right.
And it's very, very sad. So I just feel that in this state, there is a lot of politics behind this.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and we're seeing, on average, 44 people in the U.S. dying a day of opioid overdoses.
Yes.
And now there's restrictions on physicians, or actually it's coming where there's a lot more restrictions on physicians, and they're getting a little bit shy to prescribe opioids, and patients are being cut off. And those that don't qualify, because there's a lot of conditions that they have that don't qualify under the program, and I'll get into that in a little bit, that will seek heroin.
Absolutely.
And that is a very nasty path.
It is. And if I know some patients who was just cut off cold turkey, not weaned off, and then that led them to go into other places to get some help that was not good for them physically, whether it was heroin or fentanyl or all these other drugs, because they just felt that, hey, the doctor cut me off, where do I go from here? And that's very, very sad. And also, it affects their family. It affects their livelihoods, because when they become addicted, they can't function. Although I know some people are functioning on the job until it catches up with them and they can no longer function. But I just feel that we really need to have more of a discussion in this country about how we treat people who have a chronic illness or chronic pain, who need some support medically. So someone, walks into your dispensary, you educate them and let them know the process, where to begin, where to start. What I like about what you all do is your dispensary is run by pharmacists as well as nurses. Now, not that I have anything against any other dispensary, because I don't. I think it's great that you have that at your facility, because as a patient, I would be very comfortable working with you, because if I'm coming to you for the first time, second time, or ever how many times, and I'm on other medications, you all have the knowledge and the education to look at me as a patient, my patient profile, to let me know, hey, where you need to start. Because some of the stories that I hear from other patients, Joseph, is that they go to a dispensary and they pretty much pick out where they want to start, what they want to use. For me, it's mind-boggling, because how do you as a patient know where to start? I mean, if you've never used cannabis, or even if you have used cannabis, how do you know which treatment is going to work best for you? By that I mean whether it's vaping, smoking, the edibles. I mean, how would you even know where to begin?
Well, and that's a good point. I mean, imagine someone going to see a doctor, the doctor writes a certification, and then they just walk into a pharmacy and there's all these pills on the shelf.
Yes.
Which one do you pick out? Yeah, it's not as complicated as that in a dispensary, but there is a process, and we do help patients with that process. There's a lot of funny names in this industry, Bruce Banner, Ghost Train Haze, Durban Poison. That's the nomenclature of this industry. But I dig deeper, and I take a look at the cannabinoid profile and the terpenes that are in every single product, and the different routes of administration, to make my recommendations based on what the patient explains is their goals of therapy and their symptoms.
Okay.
And so the other part of the process, after the patient gets their doctor certification, and it's really it's a very simple 3-page form. The doctor fills out the patient's name, his name, and then he checks a box for the condition, and then he signs it and sends it to the Illinois Department of Public Health. The other part is where the patient would walk into my dispensary, and I could help them with their form, what they need to submit.
Okay.
I'm a licensed fingerprint vendor. I've got 2 other employees that are full-time licensed fingerprint vendors, so we can do on-site the fingerprints, the passport photo, and we have full application assistance, and we don't really charge for it.
Okay.
The only thing we charge for is the fingerprints, and we're going to be cheaper than the fingerprinting vendors that are out there because that's not our business. We do that as a service.
Now, how long does it take to get the application approved with the state, typically?
Well, when the program first started, when we had 3,000 patients in the state of Illinois, the Illinois Department of Public Health was processing applications in 30 days. Which is still a long time if you're in a lot of pain. Now, because of the backlog, it's taking an average of 87 days, and I'm seeing patients waiting as long as 4 months. And
That's a long time.
that is just not right.
No. Why does it take so long? Is there not enough personnel to review the applications?
The department is understaffed. And there's been budget cuts, and we have a governor that doesn't support the program, and so that's a very busy department, and they don't have the personnel to really process all the applications.
So we have a lot of people suffering, who need to get it approved,
Right.
and who have to wait. 4 months is a long time when you have a chronic illness, especially when you're in a lot of pain and you can't get any relief.
About the only benefit is if you have a terminal illness, and that's defined as a prognosis of 6 months or less to live, the state will turn around your application in 2 weeks. But I've seen that take as long as a month. So imagine if you have 6 months to live and you spend a month waiting for something that's going to help you.
I just sometimes feel that a lot of these policies and procedures won't change until the people who are in position to make these rules and regulations really experience it or have a life-altering change, where maybe a loved one, friend, or themselves, and then maybe to walk in someone else's shoes, they would know what that feels like, what that is like.
Exactly.
I don't know, but sometimes that's how I feel, Now, I know there's about 54 dispensaries currently. In Illinois, it started off, are we still in the pilot program, or are we beyond the pilot program?
Unfortunately, we are still in a pilot program. July of 2020 is when the program requires additional legislation to keep going. And fortunately, during the gubernatorial selecting the Republicans, selecting the Democrats, there's one Republican candidate that probably would have shut down the program.
Okay.
So I won't mention her name, but I think everyone knows who
Yes.
I'm talking about.
I agree.
So fortunately, Bruce Rauner will be the Republican candidate, but he's not exactly great for the program either.
So 54, you're right, is definitely not a lot of dispensaries, okay, because it's 54, and I would imagine with those 54, I'm just guessing, I don't have the map that I can pull up right now, but I would imagine that some people may live in communities that may require that they have to drive great distances to visit a dispensary.
Correct.
Which can create a hardship for people, especially if you don't have a car or your mode of transportation, your access to transportation is very, very limited.
And the state does not allow delivery services. I would be happy to deliver to patients,
Right.
but unfortunately, that's against the law.
So what can be done for us to have more than 54? I mean, and across the country, are there other states that have higher numbers than we do here in this state?
I think Denver alone has about 500 just in
Wow.
the city limits. And there's other states that have many more.
Okay.
Sometimes there's too many.
Sure.
There could be definitely it could be way over where you want it to be. So to have it in a controlled fashion would be good, but definitely we need more than. 54. In fact, the original plan was to have 60 in the state of Illinois, but there's 6 licenses that were never activated.
So what, as consumers and residents in the state of Illinois, what do we need to do? I feel that it's a matter of getting out to the polls to vote, but does there need to be more legislation? I mean, what can we do to help move this along?
Well, one of the things, and this is at the beginning of the Illinois medical cannabis program, under Quinn, there was an advisory panel that was developed to vote on additional qualifying conditions. And this advisory panel was led by a very prominent doctor, and there was 10 other members that were made up of other doctors, patients, legislators, and twice a year, people would fill out a petition and then get in front of the panel and give testimony to why their qualifying condition should be approved. And so over the course of a year, there was a couple of meetings and several conditions were voted on and approved and sent to the governor for final approval. Unfortunately, our governor and the Illinois Department of Public Health Director, Dr. Shah, categorically denied every condition to be approved.
I just don't.
I don't get it either.
Yeah, I just don't get that,
So chronic pain was actually put on the governor's desk 3 times, and 3 times it was denied.
That's why we need to get out and vote for the best candidate that views, support your values and what your needs are. And that's very, very sad and very disheartening, because you make that decision and people are still suffering. Mm-hmm. And I feel that leads people to going the other route to get what they need.
Yes, yes.
And I saw in the news, I think it was last week, that some people had purchased what they thought was cannabis, and it was laced with rat poison and all kinds of things. But this is, of course, on the black market. But there are many people who are going that route because they can't get what they need, unfortunately.
Right, and it's these chemicals that are sprayed on potpourri, and
Yes.
they're smoked. In fact, there was 3 reported deaths. These kids were bleeding from their eyes.
Yes.
And they call it synthetic marijuana, but it was not marijuana. It was just some coagulant that was very dangerous.
I remember one of the moms, she had 2 sons. One had passed away, and I think it was called Spice or something mm-hmm. that they were using. But you have other people, and I know many, who have severe chronic illnesses, and they need some help. And this really pushes them to the back alleys, other places, mm-hmm. where typically they wouldn't go. But people become so desperate. When you have a whole lot of pain in your body and you're suffering, a lot of people need some support. I remember, and this goes back to the 80s, my father was a lung cancer patient. He was a heavy smoker, and he stopped smoking, but he developed lung cancer. And the cancer metastasized. It spread. He lost sight in his right eye, and then it spread to his brain, and he wound up going into a coma, went on life supports, and then he passed away. But through that entire journey, that's when I first became involved with advocacy. And I became really involved with advocacy because my dad really suffered. His pain was severe. More than severe. He received chemotherapy as well as radiation therapy. And what they gave him was opioids, but that did not help his pain. And whenever I meet people who are suffering till this day, sometimes I think about my dad, how he really, really suffered. And then I think to myself that if people are experiencing the level of pain that my dad did, I can only imagine where that's going to lead them, which is a really scary place to be.
Right, right. One of my patients described to me what it was like to be in the kind of pain she was in. She said, imagine closing a door on your finger and just leaving your finger in that closed door.
Yes. Yes. Fibromyalgia is similar in that. Imagine being ran over by a truck and putting the truck in reverse and running over you again, and that pain is just so severe. Mm-hmm. And then the first line of defense, the first thing they want to give you is opioids. And then when that doesn't work, they give you some more. And when that doesn't work, they give you more. And then they wonder why we are while we're at this crisis today.
And you know, we have the same thing happening in the VA environment.
Yes.
Where a lot of these veterans that have serious injuries, they're filled with these medications that cork them out. And so there's no quality of life, and they're just a shell of the human being they used to be.
That's true. My brother served in the Vietnam War, and when he returned from the war, he had a lot of issues. And I remember when he would go to the VA, they would just load him up with all these drugs, just like they're a zombie. You know, you can't function like that. You can't live like that.
Right, right.
There is a better way.
Right, and the industry is definitely moving in the right direction. We're seeing some big-time legislators at the federal level that are actually doing 180-degree turn, supporting the program. In fact, I think you sent me.
Boehner, yes.
Yeah, John Boehner and some. Anyways, just to have a gentleman, the ex-House Speaker, do a 180-degree turn
Yes.
and actually be on the board of a cannabis company was pretty amazing.
Yes, it is. I was really surprised to see that, and when I read that and I shared it with you, first thing I said to myself was, okay, I wonder what Sessions' thoughts are on this, which direction we're going to go with this, because they want to shut it down.
Well, I read something recently where Jeff Sessions actually, for the first time, admitted that there could be some medicinal benefits of marijuana, but he didn't believe that it was having any kind of positive impact on the opioid epidemic, which is not accurate. In the states where medical cannabis is available, opioid deaths are down 25%. So there's something to that. And in fact, there's legislation in Illinois that just passed the Senate. I think we're just waiting for it to pass, the full House and Senate.
Yes.
And then it'll go on Bruce Rauner's desk and it'll probably be vetoed. But hopefully if we get, I think it's like 2/3 majority of the House and the Senate, his veto will be overridden. But the whole idea behind it is a doctor will be able to, instead of writing a prescription for Norco or OxyContin, will be able to certify a patient for medical cannabis, and that can happen pretty quickly.
I think that what we all need to do is do something similar to what the American Cancer Society did a number of years ago. I visited Springfield with them. And maybe this has been done, but this goes back to before when it came down to smoking in public places. They stopped that, and there was a large group of people. I attended, went on the bus with them, and we went to Springfield. And there was a parade, there was a march, just to spread awareness of that. And I'm thinking maybe we need to do something similar, to show up in full force. Because what I don't understand is, where are they getting their information from to support their beliefs that it's not going to help anyone? That
Right.
I never, that so far I've never heard. I've heard Jeff Sessions share his views on it, that he doesn't feel that it's really going to help people, but they never share what that's based upon, where they're getting those facts from.
Well, the federal government, for a long time, all of their studies on marijuana was on the negative effects of it. And there are negative effects.
Yes.
It's not a benign drug.
True.
But in a regulated environment, it could be very beneficial when carefully dosed, and this is the essence of my dispensary in Buffalo Grove, is we really help people get the right dosing algorithms and the route of administration so they get a benefit a lot faster, as opposed to going into
Yes.
one of the other dispensaries and maybe not getting that kind of assistance.
True.
And saying, well, what would you like? Or this stuff's really good for pain. Very information that isn't very scientific.
Yes, and that's a great concern for me because, again, a lot of the people that I serve, they don't just have fibromyalgia. They don't just have rheumatoid arthritis or ankylosing spondylitis. They may be diabetic. They may be hypertensive, so many other conditions that they're dealing with. So that's why I love your business model, that your dispensary is run by pharmacists and healthcare experts, because it does make a difference.
Sure, there's some definite drug interactions with
Yes.
with corticosteroids, with some blood thinners. In fact, we have many cancer patients, and for particular types of breast cancer, you really want to go with the right ratio of THC to CBD, because the wrong ratio can actually exacerbate certain types of breast cancer.
Wow. And see, that's why, it's great to meet people like you and to know the wonderful work that you're doing, because the average person